distracted, under a lot of pressure, facing deadlines.
Sure.
What are the benefits? What's the upside to making an investment in this kind of creativity?
Just one thing I will say right away, which is this is not some strange, disparate thing. Although you think about improv and you think about sort of comedy and entertainment, but we're improvising right now. The idea that improv is something that, do I do it now or do I not do it now? You're doing it all the time. Every conversation is improvised. It is not planned. Now, to get sort of skillful and conscious around that is kind of what we're talking about. And when you ask about skill and what are some of the things that executives might do to be better at the improv they're currently already doing, we would say there's a number of things. I'll just list a few and then I'll pass it to Amy. One is this idea that we talked about on stage, which is the idea of letting go of your agenda. So finding out what the agenda is of the other people in the room. We've noticed with executives that most meetings are agenda fests, where people come to the room, and they've got something they want to say, and then someone else has something they want to say, and they basically tune out until it's their turn, and then they say their thing, and then they kind of tune back out because they said their thing, and then everybody leaves, and even though they were together in the same room, they were like, what just happened there? That was seems like a complete waste of time. And then the real meeting happens in the hallway when they actually realize it together. So that's one example of a behavior that improv shines a light on and kind of goes, what can we do to shift that? Okay. And there's others.
Yeah, I think that Gary mentioned one earlier, which is that idea of being alert to the present. You mentioned that there are so many distractions right now, electronic, human, and other in any executive's day. And I think the ability to skillfully be present wherever you are is going to get an executive into a better flow state, get them into a place where they'll be making better, smarter decisions, and just having that self-awareness to approach something in a way that's fit and well, it's really there with what's going on in the moment, we think is invaluable.
I guess the last question would be, how do you know you've had an impact on an organization along these lines? Are there outward signs, are there behaviors, Amy, as you mentioned? How do you know that you've really sort of opened up some of the possibilities and potential of an organization and of people? That's
a great question. I think in the end it's about behavior, and that's where we stay, and that's kind of where we play. And the way to understand if behavior has shifted or changed is really over time in the end. And depending on how we get engaged, we either introduce new behavior and help them set up structures to keep practicing it, or perhaps we come in and help reinforce it. And to me, the place where I think we can sort of look at the work in total around any project or with any organization and go, this is working, is where we hear stories and see that behavior shift. That's the place where it is, and that is where this has the impact. You kind of go, you know what? The brainstormings we've been doing since we've learned these 3 or 4 different pieces of behavior from improv are incredibly productive. People leave smiling instead of frowning. People don't leave frustrated. Like, that's the stuff. And you learn that through conversation, story, and also witnessing it.
Yeah, I think in the siloed space, that's where, especially, we've been hearing a lot of great stories lately of people knowing what conversations to have and the ways to have those conversations that are productive, that help them build on one another's ideas, as opposed to just download with each other, because that's not collaborating, that's just throwing things at one another. And so I think to us that's very exciting to hear stories of people that either didn't know to work with each other or didn't know how to work with each other productively, to hear the stories of conversations that are taking place between 2 leaders, or meetings that are taking place between integrated teams that weren't happening before. It's really a great way to get people to let go of their assumptions. Okay, great. Just one more thing on a personal level. What have you each learned as individuals from improv? Is there something, is there a guiding light? Is there an experience? Is there a quote? Is there something that gets you energized on a daily basis to try to bring and apply this in organizations?
Well, I have 2 thoughts, and I'll make them quick. My wife is apt to say to me often, depending on the circumstance, she says, improv helps people learn how to listen better, but she'll often call me on that, and she'll, at certain moments in our life, go, and you teach listening, which I always think is funny. But in all seriousness, there is a quote that we shared today, which I'll share again, and it comes from Keith Johnstone, who is a bit of a master of improv and helped formulate a lot of these ideas on stage that we've taken and used further. And he says, there are those that prefer to say yes, and those that prefer to say no. Those that say yes are rewarded by all the adventures that they have, and those that say no are rewarded, which is the same word, by the safety they attain. And his observation is that there's far more no-sayers than yes-sayers. And I think about that quote a lot. Bless you. Because, first of all, he gives equal weight to both. And honestly, to me, life in general should be an adventure. I'm not interested in safety all the time. There's times for it, but it gives me some ways to think about that. So I think it's an important quote to think about on any level, personally.
Okay. All right, great. Amy, how about you?
I grew up in a naysayer environment, and in a place where the idea of doing it yourself is always the best way because nobody else can do it as well, and it's better to do it yourself than ask for help. And so the practices of improvisation have really opened my eyes to the value of other people and working with them, and realizing that it's easier when you don't do it all yourself, and it's better when you don't do it all yourself. It's more fun, and it's better. And for me, that has been a really joyous discovery that I think has probably also made me a slightly easier person to be around.
Terrific. Gary and Amy, thanks for your time and your perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much.